a really good talk if we didn't have a Lord of the Rings clip in it. So we've got a little section from Lord of the Rings that we can just watch for a minute or two, and then we'll explain the reasoning as to why we're watching it, apart from it being a great movie.
You may go no further. You will not enter Gondor.
Who are you to deny us passage?
Legolas, fire a warning shot past the bosun's ear.
Mind your aim. Oh! That's it, right? We warned you. Prepare to be boarded. Boarded? By you and whose army?
This army.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the reason that I wanted to show that is because in that video, it's much better with the audio, but Aragorn didn't look fearful of the army. Now, the reason being is because he knew that he had something that had his back, right? So he had a sort of confidence about him because he had this whole army behind him, and he knew that he would not fail in what he wanted to do. And I think in the same way, we need to relate to others knowing that our identity is in who Jesus says we are. So we have something behind us, and we can walk into situations knowing that, knowing God's promises, right? So like in forgiveness, we have been forgiven much.
Yeah, in communication, we have confidence because of God's love for us. Oh, in loving others, we're deeply loved by God, and in seeing others as valuable, we are God's children and his masterpieces. So for tonight, for the rest of the little time you get to spend with us, we've kind of broken this huge topic of like relationship toolbox, like how to have healthy relationships down into like 5 chunks. Now, we could easily spend a session each talking about each one of these, so this is kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of our practical advice, our experiences in these areas, and how we can kind of learn to have relationship wholeness.
What did you say it was?
A whistle-stop tour?
What is that?
Maybe that's an English phrase. Okay.
I've never heard that
or a
before.
Naomi phrase, whatever.
Yeah. Anyways, it might feel like a little bit like a fire hose coming at you, but our first main topic is communication. And we love dogs, so every one of our pictures has to do with dogs. So do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
Yeah, so feel like if you want to take notes. We won't be upset if you don't, but like these are kind of
I will.
this is the first topic we're going to be talking about. So communication is a big, broad topic, but we're trying to think here about like how we relate to others and the different types of relationships we have. So the first thing we're going to say is asking good questions, and the second question. So to slightly expand on that, basically when you're having a conversation with someone, after asking that initial question, like, how are you? It's good to maybe, once they respond, think of a second question. Now, that might sound basic, and you might be like, ugh, that's just really easy to understand. But there's so many, like me especially, like sometimes you've had that first question, how are you, good? And then you're like, okay, like where do I go from here? So it's just thinking about how you can ask a follow-up question to the initial thought.
Yeah, and like you could say, what was the highlight of your week? What made it good? All sorts of things, right? I find second questions are very thought-provoking, and I find it kind of makes people feel like they're cared for. When I've been asked the second question, that's how I've felt anyways. Mm-hmm. This might sound extraordinarily basic, but eye contact I find is so good in communication, because there are people that I've had conversations with who kind of just like stare at the ground or stare over there, and I'm kind of like, I'm over here. Like, my eyes are over here. Anyways.
And like, it can be really, like, we're both extroverts and loud people, but I'm not quite as forward as Joel. So I do understand, like right now, I'm not looking at anyone in the eye. I'm like, oh, there's a nice bit of nothing over there I can stare into. So I understand that it can be really awkward to like stare at someone right in the eyes, but it can show that you're listening. So That's
but also
mine.
don't like there is an art to it. Don't like you can look away, but also don't look away too much. But also don't look. Anyways, yeah. So another thing that I've found is really helpful in communication is honesty. There's no need to pretend to be someone else that you're not. Like, coming out of that identity of Christ, you should know that you are so unique, and if God wanted you to look like and be like somebody else, he would have done that, right? There's only one of you in this world, and you are the only one who can impact people like the way that you do. Nobody else can like bring to God what you have. Nobody else can talk to others like you can, right? You are unique, and God made you for a purpose.
Yeah. The next one is like hard for me to say because I wish this was true, but people aren't mind readers. So I now I will link back to an experience for Joel and I. When we started dating, I was the person that was like, whatever, I wanted him to come and like spend time with me, and I'd be like, but he should know that, so I'm just gonna like be like, I'm fine, like whatever, you can go hang out with other people. But then I'd be at home like, oh, he should have come and like hang out with me, and blah, blah. And I was like, but he should know that, I shouldn't have to tell him, and like blah, blah. So we had some discussions, and Joel, like in a sweet way, was like, but you told me you were fine and I could go hang out with other people. But for me, I just want people to know what I'm thinking and do it. And there is an element of like knowing the person, your friends and your family, and knowing what they would like. But there's also the reality of we need to just be honest and tell people like if we want them to come and spend time with us, or if we need some support, to reach out and say that, because otherwise we can end up feeling frustrated and hurt and wounded when really we just needed to speak up. And that's my personal experience. That might look different for other people, but I just want the people I'm friends with and in relationship with to know what I want and do it. But I don't think that's, I'm learning that's not quite realistic, and that's okay.
If it's important to you, articulate it, right?
Yeah.
5 love languages. So how many of you have ever heard of the 5 love languages? I won't call on you. I'm just kidding. So these 5 love languages, so they're physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service,
Gifts.
and gifts. Thank you. So the 5 love languages are, I don't know, I found them pretty revolutionary. I find it's also kind of fluid, right? It's not like you're always going to be this percentage every day of your life. Because I actually have found, since getting married, that my 5 love languages have shifted around more. And I actually, in my teens, when I first took this test, acts of service was like way at the bottom, but now I find it's like actually quite a bit higher, because I value when like Naomi like would do something for me, and I'm like, oh, that's so helpful, like I feel love when you do that, right? And I have this kind of phrase in here. So varying gestures can have varying levels of payoff. So that might sound weird, but if you're like trying to show somebody love, just maybe realize that if you buy them coffee, that might mean more to person A than person B, and spending time with them might mean more to person A than person B, just like realizing that everybody kind of receives love in a different way. And so it's important in your friendships even. You can articulate kind of like how you feel special. You can articulate it like that and say, hey, like when you did this, I felt really special and loved, so that was awesome. Give them like some positive feedback on that. So yeah. Can I talk about that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I'm like, I wouldn't say passionate. That's like in between passionate and like complacent. So texting is often not the best modality of communicating, okay? So anybody like, fun fact, how much communication is nonverbal? Anybody think they want to take a guess? 80%.
Yeah, really close.
A lot percent is the correct answer. More specifically, I looked up a study and said about like 93% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, I think it broke it down to 35% is to do with body language, and then the other is to do with like tone and like how you're saying it, which I thought was even more interesting.
Yeah, so it is really interesting. So basically, texting is a great form of communication. I use it a lot. What I maybe would suggest is that if you are having a conversation with someone that's important, I would suggest save it for either when you see them again, make a note of it, set a reminder, or phone them, okay? I know it's so much easier to text. It really is. I get it. I do that like most cases. But if you have something that's really important, I would suggest either phoning, FaceTime, or in person. Speaking from personal experience on that, I've definitely stuck my foot in my mouth plenty of times through others interpreting my text or written text, like status updates on Facebook, in a way that I haven't wanted them to. So just like, take it from me, just save yourself that trouble, just phone them, it'll be fine. And now we're on to conflict resolution. Again, a dog. Oh, forgiveness. Okay. Well, we can go to forgiveness.
Yeah, we'll do forgiveness.
We'll go to forgiveness. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, look at that dog. He's so sorry for whatever he did. Anyway, so our next kind of section is on forgiveness. Oh no, you should do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this one. So so here's kind of how I like to think about forgiveness. So forgiveness should be similar to the healing of a cut that has like turned into a scar. Okay, so when somebody hurts you, like we can all probably think of like one event in our lives where we've been hurt. Like when you first get that initial sting of that, it's gonna hurt, right? And sometimes, dependent upon the severity of the injury, it's gonna hurt for longer or shorter, right? And it's gonna leave a mark, and sometimes those marks turn into scars. Now, like I have a scar on my right elbow. I'll be honest, I don't really remember what from. Is my right elbow? It might be my left elbow. It's one of my elbows. I have a scar on one of my elbows. So that scar is still visible, and it reminds me of what happened. Well, it happened when I was young, so it doesn't actually remind me. But I have scars, like people have scars. You get the idea. So people have scars, and it reminds them of what happened. But if you like press on that point, if you like rub your fingers over that point, it's not gonna hurt, right? Because it's healed, but you still have that sign of what happened, and it's you still have that memory, but hopefully it's kind of like healed up, right? And I think sometimes it takes a longer time for scars to heal. I know there's been situations in my life, especially where somebody said something to hurt me, and I've taken it like really personally, and that takes a long time to heal. And then, you have like almost these social media scars where you have memories on this day, right? And you look back and it's like, oh, there's that dumb thing that I posted, and then this person said that thing to me, right? So that's like almost like an electronic scar, right? Where you can trace it back to that initial hurt. But kind of a sign to know that you've been healed of that is, it feels more like a scar than a cut. And God doesn't command us to forgive. Oh, and in that, all like forgiveness is an important part of the healing process, right? So I don't really think that you can heal fully unless you kind of come to this place of forgiving that person. And forgiveness does not equal acceptance. I think I put that somewhere else, whatever. But like God doesn't command us to forgive because he's a God of injustice. He commands us to forgive because it actually releases us of the bitterness, anger, or negative feelings that we can feel because of the wrongs that have been done to us. Yeah. So like forgiveness might sound like it's for the other person, but it's actually for us. It's actually for us who carry the hurt, because it releases us from like all of our mental resources being drawn towards that. And whenever we see that person, like all of our thoughts being driven toward this, like, oh, that happened, and now I'm very frustrated, right? So and maybe that's an area where you're thinking like, God, I need your help to heal from this. And as Jess talked about last week about inner healing, right? Maybe that's an area where you need inner healing so you can be free from that. So
yeah. So for me, like as Joel was saying, I'm sure there's somewhere in your life that you can think of more than one experience where like you've really had to work through forgiving someone. And I've got an example from a season of my life about 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm going to kind of speak into that because I'm hoping that it can show, I can show where God was at work in that really challenging situation. So before I moved here, I was working as a teacher in England, and I was working as a grade 3 teacher, and the principal of the school I was working in was an emotionally abusive person, and I didn't know this when I kind of started my job, but as the year went on, it soon became apparent that she was extremely hurtful and emotionally abusive to her staff. There was an incident that happened about 6 weeks into my job where she came into my classroom and like, this is going to sound fake, but it's real. She like threw everything off my desk and told me I was a disgrace and shouted in my face and did these very degrading things to me, and then left the room. For a 6-week teacher on your first year, that is like mortifying, and I wanted to quit that night. And I still had a year contract, so I had to figure out how I was going to get through that experience. And so began a year-long process of trying to forgive this lady as she continually hurt me and the people around me. And I really wrestled with how I was going to do that, because, to be honest, I wanted to kind of run into her office and throw something at her. That's like what my heart wanted to do, or call up the school board and tell them to fire her. But I didn't do either of those things. What I did do is go to people in my life who I trusted and who I knew had a relationship with the Lord, and kind of said, how do I work through this, and how can I come to a place of forgiveness when there's continual hurt? Because sometimes God calls us to forgive people not when like we're never going to see them again. The ideal situation is someone hurts you and then you run away from it and you never see them again, and then you can forget about it. But sometimes we're in positions where we're continually seeing people that are hurting us, or in a relationship. Like, I was in a work relationship with this woman and I couldn't really do anything about it at the time. So I was trying to figure out how I could come to a place of forgiveness while this was kind of continuing. And it was a very interesting journey for me. I would say that forgiveness is an ongoing process, and sometimes you can't have that resolution. Like, we're going to talk about conflict resolution, but you can't always have that resolution conversation with someone that you want to have. But I came to a position where, as Joel was saying, for me, I had to forgive her. And that looked like every morning when I stepped into the school, I would say, Jesus, I give this woman to you, and I forgive her for what she's done to me and what she's going to do today. And I did that pretty much all year. And through that, and as I said, like talking to people, having mentors, having friends, crying, praying, and kind of working through how to deal with that situation, I did, get through it, quote unquote. But I have to say that even now, 2 or 3 years later, there'll be times when something will happen and it will remind me, and I'll have to go back to my room, to my Bible and to my journal, and, write a prayer again. Lord, I forgive whatever for doing this to me, because it still has an impact. So I'd like to say that it would be a quick and easy process, but sometimes it isn't. But God can come in and work through you and with you to get to that place of forgiveness. And now I would say that I do forgive her for what she's done, but I'm still saddened by what happened. And it's, as Joel said, it's still kind of a part of my journey, but it's also kind of taught me a lot too.
That's like more of a scar versus an open wound, right?
Definitely.
So blitzing through these kind of last 2 points.
Yeah.
So forgiveness isn't easy. It's a very intentional choice. So I think we think sometimes like, we go back to elementary school where the teacher pulls us aside and we've done something, or another person has done something. That's like, okay, you say you're sorry, you say you forgive them, right? And I think sometimes we hope that like somebody will do that for us, but like, we're all young adults now, and like nobody's doing that for us. So it's not an easy thing, and you do actually have to be intentional about it. So there's more I could say, but I want to not drone on.
All right, moving to the next one. Cultivating deeper relationships. Oh, I know.
So cute, right? It's so cute. You can talk about this.
Yeah, okay, so this is like, whether you're talking about friendships, families, romance, or whatever, like one thing we want to try and do in all our relationships is to cultivate a deeper relationship, to grow in that relationship. So we're going to talk about how some practical ways we can do that. The first point we have written down here is fun, ! Adventure, ! In all caps. So, but seriously, like some of the best ways you can grow in relationship with people is through having fun. Now, fun is a very different word for lots of people, but that could mean like going to a coffee shop for some people. It could mean skydiving. It could mean going on a hike. It could mean having whatever you and the person you're trying to get to know better find fun. Like, that is how you can build deep relationships. That's why people go on vacations, go on trips, do things together, because like team building, it's all the way to kind of get to know those people better. So if you're looking to develop deep relationships with people, these often come through shared experience. So many people will be like, oh, do you remember on that trip like 5 years ago when this happened, like, ha ha ha, shared joke. Yeah. But it's through those memories and shared experiences that you get to deeper places where you can be vulnerable and open up and get to a place where you know each other better.
Yeah, and they also take commitment and consistency. If you only spend time with someone like every few months, you won't have the level of friendship that you might if you spend more time with them. Like the time investment that you put in is kind of going to be like equivalent to like the product of that, right? The fruit of the time that you've spent with them. So yeah, if you want to deepen relationships, time is like a reality of that. So the next one is relationships are give and take. So very few people, in my opinion, want to hang around somebody who just talks about themselves all the time. If you find that you maybe don't have a lot of friends, I would suggest like try to invest in people around you. I realized those were linked. It's like, if you find you don't have a lot of friends, stop talking about yourself. Anyways. It's not actually linked, I just realized. So yeah, so it's important to have that kind of give and take. And like, I think even don't be the type of person who just asks questions all the time. Like, be open to letting people into your life. Like if you, because I know when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I don't want to just like talk about myself the entire time. I want to learn about what's going on with them, right? Like what's going on with you. Anyways, so.
Yeah, well, the last one on that is to plug into a community, and you're all here. So that's a good sign, because it looks like means you're trying to plug into this community. But whether that's like at university, in your work, or whatever, like finding a community that's supportive, and this is the perfect place for that. Like these groups, even though you've just been with them, like this is the 3rd week, that is like starting to cultivate a deep community, but it's only as deep as like you let it to be. So if you kind of, and I'm not saying this to be rude or pressurizing, but if in the small group time coming up you kind of decide for whatever reason you don't really want to talk about any of the questions and you're just going to leave it, you're not really going to grow into a deep relationship because you're not opening up and being vulnerable. And I know that's a scary thing, but this is the type of place where it's okay to do that. This is a safe space. There might be places that aren't in your life, and that's completely fair enough, but I would really encourage you, if you haven't kind of shared yet, this is tonight's the night to kind of step into that sharing space.
Yeah. Do we have conflict resolution as a slide? Okay, we'll just blitz through it. It had another great dog pick, but that's okay. So we'll breeze through this. So basically, you've heard of the 5 languages of 5 love languages. There's also like the 5 languages of apology by the same guy, Gary Chapman, and which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you haven't looked into it, you should. It's cool.
I recommend that. So that being like, not everybody actually likes resolving conflict the same way. So some people also expect different things in apologies. So some people might expect, when to be a satisfactory apology, I need them to buy me a Kit Kat and a Diet Coke, right? That might be one person. Another person might be something else, right? So everybody has like different expectations of what they think. And similarly to the 5 love languages, if I'm, trying to make something up that I did that was dumb or something, which happens, hard to believe. But, like if I'm doing something and I haven't communicated with Naomi, like how she deems a like satisfactory apology, like she might not, connect with that.
Well. And I think as much as the Kit Kat and the Diet Coke's a cute idea, what it's more about is it's like, for example, like if someone's saying like they need to hear the words "I'm sorry" to like feel like that's a good apology, or like the words like "I forgive you for what you've done," or they need to hear certain things. So I would look into it. It's really interesting. I would say that when you are like in a good friendship or a family member or a romantic relationship, like try and figure out how the other person like resolves conflict. This was like really probably one of the biggest challenges for Joel and I when we started dating, because I'm the person that's like wanting to resolve it now. Like we just had a disagreement. Oh no, let's fix it. Like I'm the one that's like calling you up like, hi, let's fix it. Hi, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm sorry. And Joel's like, I need space to think about this. Then we can talk. And I'm like, no, that's not okay. Which was even harder when we were dating long distance, because there's a whole ocean in the middle. And I'm like, like, no, like, answer me, like, I'm far away. Anyway, but like, I learned that if I pushed Joel to have that apology straight away, he might snap at me, he's going to be more upset, and there will be a second issue to resolve afterwards. So I have learned that for us to have a successful like conflict resolution, I need to give him some space before we have those conversations, and then they will be a productive conversation. So that doesn't just relate in like romantic relationships, like friendships, family relationships. Think about the other person when you need to resolve conflict, which is very hard if you're frustrated with them because you don't want to think about what's best for them, but that's what we're called to do.
Yep. And like a very practical thing you can do if you are that type of person that likes resolving things right away and maybe the other person isn't, just the simple question you can ask is like, do you need a bit of time to like process this, right? So you can just ask that. You don't have to have that like level of connection to do that. We're gonna blitz through these next ones. So a phrase that is good when you're trying to resolve conflict is it's when you did or said ... it made me feel ... because they might not have actually intended it like that, but you obviously interpreted it like that. Yeah. And it's important to articulate that, because if I've said something to Naomi, she finds it offensive but doesn't say that, and I wasn't meaning to be offensive, I'll just carry on through my day and I won't think anything of it. But she might mull it over and think about it more and more when it's not even necessary, because like, well, I shouldn't say that, but like,
you weren't intending it to be in that way. Yeah, totally. Exactly. Yeah. So I would say along with that, like, try and avoid saying or like blanket statements such as you never listen or you are always rude, like never and always, because in the moment you might be feeling that, but that can like leave a scar. And we can't go down this route right now, there's not time, but words really hurt. Like in the Bible, like words, you know, the tongue is sharper than a double-edged sword, and look into James if you want to know some about some of those things. But we really need to be careful with the words we say when we're resolving conflict, because it can really leave deep wounds. Yeah.
So the next thing is what I like to call the sunset rule. So as much as possible, try not to let things fester and become a bigger deal than they are already. Every day is a fresh start. But you also don't want to carry yesterday's worries into today, because today has enough worries of its own, okay? So try and resolve that conflict before the sun goes down if you can. If you can't, just try and resolve it quick, because you don't want those things to linger, and then you have a situation of unforgiveness and yada, yada, yada. And then this last one is...
probably the most important one about this topic, which is remember during times of conflict that you're still called to love as Jesus loved. This is especially important in our relationships with our non-Christian friends, because when we're in those places of like there's been an issue or a problem, we still have to show Jesus' love, and it can be the hardest at those points, but we are still called to love in the way that Jesus does. So yeah,
that's what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Next slide. Romantic relationships. Okay. I forget.
This is the last section.
Okay, so I'm gonna blitz through like some points on dating well. Okay, so I'm not trying to toot our own horns here, but I would say we actually dated like pretty well. So very quick summary of life of Nay and Jay. So we met at camp. We were at camp together for about like 2 months. 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Started dating. And then like at the end of the summer, she went back to England, and then we did 9 months long distance with 3 visits. So she came over here for a week. I went over there at Christmas for a week and a half, and then she came here for a week in February. And then I went there for 3 months in the summer of 2017, and then we got engaged and then continued. But why I like to say that we did dating well is because we heard a lot of bad experiences from people about long distance relationships, but we actually, I would say, had a very successful one. And I believe that's due to the fact that we made like that time for each other. We communicated every day. We made an effort to talk every day, even if it was just 5 minutes. There were a whole bunch of other things, but yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna like blitz through some points. So please, don't talk about marriage on a first date. Please.
There's very few exceptions, but general.
Please. I'm passionate about that one. Okay, slightly less passionate topics. So stuff that you can do to date well. Ask good questions, okay? Connect with God together, okay? Worship, Bible studies, prayer, whatever, okay? I found this quote that was cool. It says, a godly relationship should build the one you have with Jesus, not replace it, okay? So you should be better together than you are apart. If you're not better together, you need to look and reevaluate some things. This is so important too. Please talk about your non-negotiables in the dating phase. Don't save it till marriage. You should not find out a week into marriage that your spouse does not want kids and you do.
And the thing is, you might think I'm joking, but I know stories of people who, long distance relationship, 3 years in, they find out the other person would never move to the other country and they broke up. And that's heartbreaking. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
The literal purpose of dating is to find out whether you're compatible or not, right? That is the dating phase. That's the purpose of it, and getting to know each other, obviously. But yeah,
we got to speed. We got to speed through.
We're blitzing, okay? So talk about your non-negotiables: kids, no kids, country to live in, what kind of faith community you want to be a part of, etc. Just Google it. If you're in a relationship and you're finding it's not going well, okay, I would say two things. One, and they'll sound very contradictory, but the first one, don't give up at the first sign of trouble. But then also, the second one, don't hold on to a relationship just to fill a void, okay? So if you believe that that person is the right one, everything's going, but you're just hanging a rough patch, persevere, be committed, but also, don't hold on to a relationship just because you want to be in a relationship, okay? You should be in the relationship because you want to date that person, not because you want to date. Okay?
Yeah, I would say the next two are kind of linked. Have fun together and laugh lots. I would say that if you're 6 months in and you haven't had any fun in your relationship, then alarm bells, big time. And this is really important too. Be spiritually compatible, brackets, see eye to eye on the bigger things. So ask those questions. This is going to sound really cringy to some people, but honestly, Joel and I, the first thing I probably said to him, we were sitting next to each other on the bus, and I said, hi, what's your testimony? Which is such a weird chat up line, but I'd heard things about him, and I was not in a bad way, but I just wanted to know where he was at, what his life journey was at, and where he was in his relationship with Jesus, because that was really important to me. So be bold and ask those questions early on. It's really, really important, especially if you don't know the person.
Yeah, and on that note, okay, speaking to the ladies here, the single ladies, okay, don't be afraid to make the first move, okay? It's the 21st century. Just saying, just do it. Sometimes we don't, as guys, get the hints that you might be laying down. Just do it, man. Yeah.
There we go.
Anyways.
So now we're kind of moving a bit more towards engagement and towards marriage. But yeah, you do that. Go on then.
So the next one is we have boundaries. Okay. Now could talk a lot about this, but anyways, so I'm just gonna say there's huge merit in saving the physical aspects of your relationship for later. So Naomi and I had the blessing of not being in the same place to a degree because we developed our communication so well during that long distance period that we kind of knew I don't know, I would say that time is kind of compounded to others because we could only literally talk, we couldn't watch movies, blah, 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 blah. So, oh yeah, that's a note I put. So culture's perspective is very interesting because sex is seen as a very only physical act, but sex is not at all only physical, right? So it's physical, emotional, spiritual, all the alls, right? So it's a deeper thing because people wonder, when they get physically intimate with one another early on, and then they build a relationship around that, right? They start to wonder, why are we running into all these issues, a year in, 2 years in, right? It's because you haven't built that base before you've gone into that, because you're already connecting yourself when you get physically intimate with another person. And I'm not being boo-hoo, ho-ho on all this stuff, because it's all great stuff, right? But it's really important to save that, because if you're more physically intimate in the dating relationship and you're not saving that, right, you're going to not necessarily set yourself up in the best way, because you might not know each other, right? That's the point I'm trying to get. The dating phase is for getting to know one another and finding out whether you're compatible. Don't feel the pressure to gain experience. That's garbage. Naomi like hadn't kissed anybody before, and we worked through it.
Yeah, it's so bad, guys. No, it's fine. Joel persevered, but we got there in the end.
Oh, yes, this is another all caps one I'm passionate about. Don't get married either prematurely or too soon to have sex. Please. Like, don't rush things, okay? It'll all work out, okay? Life is long.
So we're we're getting very close to the end, and I know this has felt like extremely rushed, but we're just going to quickly touch on, we've obviously just talked about dating and romantic relationships, but that's not like the only option in life. Like, I think sometimes, and this is extremely stereotypical, but sometimes it can be assumed that like Christian people should just get married, and like that's the way, and the church is set up in, and sometimes can be seen in a way of like married couples being like put to the forefront. And we just wanted to quickly touch on the topic that like marriage and singleness are equally valid, and there's not like a right or wrong or a better, like you're not a better Christian if you're married or not. And there's a lot in the Bible about this, especially Paul. He has loads to say on this, so if you haven't looked into that and you want to, like, please look into like some of the stuff Paul says about that. He actually says like people should only get married if they can't control their sexual urges, and everyone else should be like him and single and like working for the Lord, which is like a really bold statement to make. So like it's not something that's just kind of brushed over in the Bible.
Totally. And like if you are in a season of singleness right now, like I would encourage you, like press into this season, because number one, like one of the like really cool things about being single and being a Christian is that you have so much time, right? Like you have all this time that you can use to invest in your relationship with God, invest in your relationship with friends, invest in like serving if you want to. Like you will never have like more time than you do like by yourself versus being with another person. And it's like time well spent, obviously, but you have more time naturally as a single person versus if you were in a relationship. I actually like, before we met each other, I was really pressing into God, and I was like, I had like been rejected like 3 or 4 times in a row, and I was like, what the heck, getting so frustrated. And then I was thinking like, if God called me to a season, well, not a season, if he called me to singleness for the rest of my life, could I accept that, knowing that he is good, he is for me, his plans are better than mine, and all this stuff? And then I came to a begrudged yes. Like, I wasn't happy about it, but I was like, yeah. and so just know, like, it's so important to come to that place because, like, of acceptance. And it's not like acceptance of your situation necessarily, because God knows the desires of your heart and he promises that he will fulfill them. But that first kind of part of that verse, take delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart, is take delight in the Lord. Okay, so you need to learn to take delight in the Lord. It's so important. I could preach on that, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, so we're gonna end now, and like that has been literally like so many things to say. But this is like the overall point of all that we've said, like all the practical things, all the ramblings that we've rambled about our life. But the conclusion is like our identity should not be found in what we do or don't do or what happens to us. It should be found in Jesus. So no matter if you're in a place right now where you feel like all the significant relationships in your life are kind of crumbling, or you've moved away from home and you haven't found good connections here, or you're feeling really lonely, or you could be in a place where you think everything is going really well in your relationships and you feel like you're doing all you can to kind of bring them to Jesus. All of that should be founded in who we are in Jesus, that we're sons and daughters and we are loved, and no matter what relationships we're in, that remains the same. And there's a lot more that could be said on that, but
totally. And like use the security and identity that you have in Christ to radically love and invest in the relationships that you have with those around you. Okay? Yeah, let's pray. Jesus, thank you for tonight. Thank you that we can come and learn more about you, learn more about relationships and relational wholeness. God, I pray that the words that were from you would just like go so deep in all of my friends' hearts, and the ones that weren't from you, that they would just be forgotten in their sleep, and that you would really be instilling a sense of what you want everybody to take from this, and that you, God, would be just speaking to our hearts even as we enter into a time of discussion with our groups. And God, that you would feel the freedom to work in our groups, and God, that you would empower us to share and be vulnerable and communicate and all those good things that we just talked about. So, Jesus, thank you for who you are and your goodness, and God, we love you. Amen.